It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Rick Morris.
Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. So excited to be here with you today. We've got another phenomenal podcast. I am with my co-host, Rick Morris. Rick, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, excited to be here. Excited to talk about today's book.
Yeah. You know, we've had such a great series of discussions in terms of the books that we've hit. And today, it's another one. It's another one that really kind of follows on the heels of the last one. So the last book we did was Dan Pink's book, To Sell is Human. And now we get into a little bit more elements in terms of the power that influence has and how we can do that, right? So why don't you unpack for us the book that you chose? And I was 100% with you on this one when you chose it, but what is that book and who's the author?
Yeah, this one is Influence, the Science and Practice of Persuasion by Dr. Robert Cialdini. Let me tell a quick story how I even landed here. So I've said on stage, many times that the number one skill a project manager is supposed to develop is influence. That's the number one thing that we can do. And so I started to go down this path of, there's got to be a way to measure influence, an influence quotient or an influence way. I wanted to start to see if there was a way that we could not only teach but measure influence. So I did what anybody else would do, is I went and Googled to see if anybody's done it before, and I landed on Dr. Robert Cialdini. What was interesting is when I landed on him, I didn't know, or I knew at the time that he was going to be our guest speaker at the John Maxwell team event coming up in a few months at that time. So I was like, cool, I'm just going to pause this idea. I'm going to go listen to Dr. Cialdini, and then I'll make a determination from there. After listening to him, I signed up and actually wanted to become certified in this practice. And then turns out you actually go to Phoenix and you sit with Dr. Cialdini, and it was like three of us going through this class, and Dr. Cialdini and a couple of his people, and to get certified to be able to do the Principles of Persuasion workshop. So really, really cool. But that's how I came across this book and really started to dive into influence, and it became huge to me. Now there's 7 factors. We're going to stay with the 6, I think, at this point, to be pure, but that no matter what happens, that there's 6 key factors, and one of those 6 are always available to you in order to utilize influence. That's what we're going to talk about today, Paul.
Yeah, this is a great book, guys. So make sure you grab your pen and your paper, capture some thoughts. And we've said this before. Look, we're only going to touch the surface, scratch the surface in terms of some of the great nuggets and elements from our books, and this one included. We're not going to go as deep as we could, maybe should, and maybe you want us to, but we only have a limited amount of time to do it. We want to make sure we cover all 6, and we'll touch a little bit on the 7th. So just so to recap, Cialdini, I don't know when he wrote this book. It's his groundbreak. It's probably his number 1 selling book. He's got other ones, so. Let's be clear. He's got some great, fantastic resources and books. This one he updated over the last few years, where he realized there's this unity element to it. And again, we'll touch on that a little bit later. But 6 of these principles he kind of uses as his foundation for a lot of his work. And there's some great examples. You can see it. These are observable states of things that happen every single day. Our last podcast, we talked about the fact that we're all in sales, that we all have an opportunity to influence and move people. This book, I think, is perfect, for us to do a kind of a follow-on based on what we talked about in the last podcast. If you haven't had a chance, please go back, watch, and listen to that podcast. But be ready to take notes again for this one. So you ready to dive into some of these levers, if you will?
Yeah, and I'm going to tie in the last podcast. First, to be clear, this is a very academic book. So Dan Pink does a really good job of, telling stories and kind of writing for the masses. This is very, very academic. So it's not maybe as easy of a read as some of our other books.
Yep.
But what I enjoyed about it were the examples in it, and when all of the different studies that they used to be able to back up their claims that these are areas of influence. And literally hundreds of thousands of studies have been conducted that Dr. Cialdini has gone through to pull these things out. But I said in the last podcast that there was a word because, and there's just certain words that come out all the time. And he did this. There was a study around just trying to see, is there a way that we can ask a question that would compel somebody to move a little bit more than the other? And this one, the first one was around somebody's at a copier and you want to interrupt because you just have 5 pages that you want to do. And so the first time they did this, and this was literally a controlled study, they went up and said, excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the machine because I'm in a rush? And 94% of the people were like, sure, and let you step in. They asked the question, excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the machine? That only got 60% compliance. Yeah. Now, you might think that the difference in this was saying that I'm in a rush. But actually, the key word here was because. Yeah. So if you say, excuse me, I have 5 pages, may I use the machine because I have to make some copies, that got 93% compliance. So it wasn't the fact that you were in a rush, it was the word because. It's because you explained what it was that you were going after. And so little things like that, I think, are really, really important, especially when we're having to choose specific language to move people in a specific way. That's where influence really starts.
Yeah, it's a power word, the because statement. And I'll be honest, Rick, I remember Cialdini sharing that at the event that you and I went to, not the training that you went through, which is fantastic. I need to kind of look into that, but I did go through just kind of more of a high level training. He talked about the word will and the word because, and because that's something that I haven't put in practice like I ought to and need to. So you've already given me a tip and challenge to start off our podcast and just leveraging that, because people, it goes back to Simon Sinek's why, right? Start with why. Sometimes you need to embed the why, and the because statement gets you to the why.
And there's just so many little, one of the things that, and I hear it all the time too, and I'm guilty of this all the time as well, but they were talking about working with a company that wasn't getting a lot of follow-up sales, basically very difficult client and all this other stuff. But a lot of times when somebody says, thank you, you really went out of your way. The common response is no problem or no worries. And I do that all the time. Hey, no problem at all. That actually is losing a point in which you can influence people. What you say instead is, you know what, that's just what partners do, or that's what friends do for each other. And in doing that, you're actually setting a hook here for what's one of the most powerful movers, I think, and he talks about, is reciprocation.
Yes.
If you just say, that's what partners do, or that's what we do for one another, that's basically saying that means I'm going to have a request at some point. It's almost the mafia of this is an offer you can't refuse, but reciprocation is one of the most powerful things. And he talks about it in like the Hare Krishna at airports, the way they kind of engineered this way of donations with the flowers. Now it happens more and more, but basically they gave you a flower and they didn't ask anything in return. You could take the flower and go. But then they would ask for the donation, and almost there was an obligation to donate at that point because you received something of value, whether you put a lot of value on it or not. When you chose to accept that, then there was almost this inherent, and he calls them click-whir responses, that your brain just snaps in and says, wait a minute, like I do need to give them something for this. I thought that was really, really powerful. So reciprocation is one of my favorites. And this comes into kind of a personal thing, Paul, right? The way that I honor my father, we've talked about it on the podcast as well, is that I'll pick up tabs for people. I just pick up bar tabs or things like that. It's not about being, in fact, my rule is I don't want anybody to know, right? I really don't want anybody to know. But when someone has found out, and I talked about the Bermuda trip here before, but remember picking up a table for Bermuda Bob, a friend of ours from from JMT, and he had a table full of people from Bermuda. And then I had some family that were going to Bermuda, and I remember reaching out to Bob and was just like, hey, you know, is there a way, is there something cool you could tell them to do? I wasn't asking for anything. Next thing you know, like they had limos picking them up and gifts at the hotel for them. They shut down this really scenic restaurant so that they could have a private dinner with this beautiful sunset, like rolled out the red carpet, all because I picked up like $100 tab, right? They gave me like 10 grand in return, right? And in terms of stuff, but it was that really, really powerful side of reciprocation.
Yeah, this one really is powerful. He leads off with that in this book, right? It's kind of his first core principle that he's talking about, you know, and I've seen him actually introduce this second, you know, like the notes that I have here actually have him talking about the liking bit, which we'll get to in a little bit, but this whole thing of reciprocity, very powerful. Adam Grant, which is not a book that we have in our books to lead, and we did talk about Adam Grant being highlighted in To Sell is Human. He talks about in Give and Take this whole idea of reciprocity. And Cialdini's point is, and that's a great story, Rick. What you just share is powerful, and it makes me realize that, you know what, sometimes it's the right thing to do, just to honor and value somebody else. And we don't give to get favors in return, but it is a natural law that takes place. It happens. So don't just do this just to think, well, gosh, I just bought, you know, drinks for everybody at that table, you know, I'm waiting. It may not happen, right? Rick, I'm sure there have been other situations where you've paid for somebody's tab and you didn't really see a return on that, right? It's happened.
Oh, for sure. And there's also the converse of that, where people would come and hang out, not with an interest to be around the table, just knowing that I would pick up that tab, right? So, and I know who those people are, right? And that's fine.
Yeah, but if you put yourself in a position to be able to offer and give and serve, we talked about serving last week. This is a way to serve, and when you serve in the right way, then you know, my uncle has a great line that he told me. It was kind of his, you know, I asked him what's the secret of success is, and I've shared it before on here, and I'll share it again. I said, Uncle Jay, now he was married to my mom's sister. So, and this guy is an engineer. He invented you know, some of the computers that go on ships. He was a pioneer. He was an impact guy, and I had a chance to drive. We were picking up something, and I asked him a question in our ride. And I said, "Hey, Uncle Jay, what would you say what's been the secret? I mean, what's been the one thing that's made the most difference in your life that you could share with me?" And he says, "Paul, your outlook drives your output, and your output always comes back around as input." And that was so powerful when he shared it. And he's really talking about reciprocity. He's sharing that, hey, look, as you look upon life and you see the opportunities that you have, at the connections that you have, and the value that you can add, when you do so, you're going to find that things are going to come back around, and they're going to be inputs in your life. It's, you know, it's the law of the harvest. It's what you sow is what you reap kind of concept, but it is so powerful, and it's a way to live. It's a mindset. So Rick, you're not just using this principle as a means to be able to get to things of value for you. You're doing this as a means to be able to add value to those around you. And that's what's powerful about reciprocity.
Well, and it goes on one other side. Reciprocity also comes with, you know, concessions. If you make concessions, then right, the reciprocal side of that. What was really interesting, aha moment for me as I went through this, is I had a technique that I developed in sales that I knew worked. I never knew why it worked. I just knew it did. And then when I studied this, I was like, oh, that's why that works. So it started off, I did it once as a joke. I was just something that came to the top of the head. And then I started to refine the technique as a way to kind of do it. So here it is. Inevitably, when I was selling software solutions, the prices would vary greatly depending on how many licenses and what they wanted. But inevitably, I would be 20 minutes into an introductory sales call, and they would ask me to do a ballpark price. And that's standard. Like you get that all the time. And I started to do a joke, and I'd say, you know what? I know you're just throwing this out right now, and maybe the project's about $250,000, right? I'd say, you know what? I guarantee it's going to be less than 5 million. But until we really get into this anymore, and they would do what you just did, Paul. They would laugh, and then I would even follow up with that with a second one. I go, actually, you know what? I'm really liking you guys. I'm telling you right now, 2.5 million tops, maybe even 1 million, right? And it was a joke, and it allows me to get past it. It allows me to set some context. What I didn't know is psychologically, though, when I did pitch that 250,000, they were comparing that to the million. And instantly it was lower than an expectation.
Yeah.
Just that little technique, but that's this concession and rejection and retreat technique that Dr. Cialdini talks about. But if you make a big initial request in which they say no, and then you follow up with the real request, the likelihood that they will then concede with you is greater. And so I stumbled across this as well when I was selling lawn and garden at Sears. We have this thing of saving your best for last. No, it's a comparison.
Yeah.
So I just learned in my pitch that there was this one tractor we called the Boss. And so anything above that was more expensive, more options thing. Everything below it was less expensive. So it was right in the middle. And I'd always start them there and say, here's all the stuff that you get it. Here's the price. I'd say, now, if we step down to this one, you lose this, but this is the price. You go to this one, you lose this, this is the price. And they would always come back and buy the Boss, right? The first one that I showed, because I'm conceding, right? And going through rejection, and they're starting to go, oh no, I see the value of that place. But if I walked them up, most likely they would start at the first tractor, because everything from that point forward became a comparison. Really, really important point.
So good, guys. This is gold from Rick. Thank you, man. I'm learning from you, buddy. I love it. All right. So reciprocity, we've hit that one. The next one that he talks about in this book, and again, the order changes depending on which book you pick up, but is this idea of liking, right? If people like you, they're more likely to say yes, is really essentially that. Let's unpack that one a little bit. Talk about the power of this one.
Yeah, again, we go for what we like. Think about it right now in your clickware response. You've got a brand of jeans, you've got a brand of shoes, you've got a brand of things that you like. And so now it's almost the other brands have to convince you that to like them more at this point, right? It's that natural consistency that you're going into in liking. But also, if you don't like somebody, if you don't like something, you're not likely. Think of an actor that I love Ryan Reynolds. Perfect. I love Ryan Reynolds. Yeah. I'm pretty much going to watch any movie he's in, just because I like him, right? Just that alone right there is the principle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. My wife and I were just watching Red Notice. It was him and The Rock. They're in a new Netflix series. Yeah. And why did we watch it? Because we like those. We like, I forget who the other actor. We liked all the actors in there.
Gal Gadot is in there too, right?
Yeah. So you're gonna watch that. Denzel Washington. I'll watch a Denzel Washington movie without sometimes even reading what the movie's about.
Yep.
Because I love Denzel Washington. So it's a great point. Liking. I love this quote. He says at the very beginning of this chapter. He says, this is from Joe Girard, from the Guinness Book of World Records. He's the greatest car salesman ever, I guess, maybe. I don't know. He says, there's nothing more effective in selling anything than getting customers to really believe you like them. So powerful. And we talked last week about attunement, buoyancy, clarity. And if you want to get to you want to get folks to know, like, and trust you, then think about that attunement element to it, right? Think about the upserve that we talked about as well, and make sure that you're putting yourself in a position. If again, great advice from my uncle. He says, if you like them, they're gonna like you. Pretty simple stuff, right?
Absolutely.
If you like them, they're gonna like you. So
it manifests it manifests addressing similar, right? Yeah. In the acceptance. I really like the sports, the association side of this as well, in liking, right? When you like something, and when there was an association side, He said, when we associate to a sports club, then we want them to win to prove our own superiority, right?
Yeah.
And he was, but hearing the pronoun of we, he said, so they did this test. They did a study that said, if they use the we won or we lost, right, there was a 24 to 25% people associating with that versus they won or they lost.
Yeah.
Because it's this inclusiveness. We like them and we want to be a part of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
found
by the
that
way, this, I'm not sure where this fits, but the word like is so powerful. Like here's how I've used it before. I've gone up with somebody. It's the 101% principle, right? You're familiar with that, right?
Yeah.
Well, Maxwell talks about, hey, find that 1% that you really connect with somebody, even though you may not 100% connect with somebody, but find that 1% that you really do, and then give that 100%. Well, I've used that principle going up to somebody and say, hey, and recognizing the value that they had. I say, hey, I would really like your take on this. I really value, your perspective here. I would like for you to share with me. Will you give me your thoughts on this? And the like plus the will always gives me a yes answer. I've never not gotten one, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I really like, I really like what you had to share here. Will you will you spend a couple minutes just sharing a little bit more on this? I have a question for you. Or that like and the will. And I truly mean it. I'm not just trying to just steal their time away. I value their time. But because the fact that I'm showing appreciation for who they are and what they have, and the 101% kind of principle, it has an effect. I think that fits with this like principle, but I'm not sure.
It does. It does.
Okay. Good. All right. So the next one, you ready for the next one?
Yeah. Throw it to me.
Social proof, baby.
The social proof, first of all, is what social media is built on, right? The whole liking, the whole thing, right? Even Facebook's term liking, I like that post, right? You can see the influence that's coming with that. But there's a video that they show to demonstrate this, and you can find it on YouTube, and we can find a link for it. But it's this dancing man. He's at this festival, and he's by himself, and he's out of his mind, and he's just dancing, right? You actually see this lady in white walk by and kind of look at him awkwardly and keep moving, like want to dissociate. And it's a really powerful lesson in leadership as well, because it's not necessarily the leader. It's the first follower that generates a movement. So if you're just dancing by yourself, you're just a dancing nut. Well, then this guy comes up and starts dancing with him. And he's clearly making fun of the guy, right? He's clearly just, thinking the guy's out of his mind. He's making fun of him. But now there's two people doing it, right? And so the guy that comes up to make fun of him, he calls one of his buddies over there, and he joins in, not to dance with the guy, but to join in and making fun of him, essentially. But now there's three people.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you know, there's 5 people, there's 7 people. Now you become not part of the norm if you're not dancing with them, because there's so many people dancing around them. So now there's literally like a crowd of 70, 80 people. And now it's a full-on movement. And you actually see that lady in white come back in and join in. Very, very powerful in the concept of social proof, but it's not always the leader, it's the first follower. And then it became acceptable to join. There was social proof that was okay, and everybody joined in. That to me just wraps up social proof in a nutshell.
Well, I'll give you a great example. That's powerful. I remember in our town, and everybody, you've been to Chipotle, right?
Oh yeah.
And it's a go-to place. Well, when they first opened up a Chipotle, they took over a Boston chicken restaurant, and like everybody loved that Boston chicken restaurant. It was gone. All of a sudden there's a Chipotle in there, and people weren't sure about this. They were kind of questioning it, and they weren't getting a lot of business initially. But one person goes in, and then you start to see the social proof element. People talking about, oh, have you been to Chipotle? It's like Cava. That's another one where I've seen it, where initially there may be some reluctance because somebody's not used to that kind of Mexican fare of food, or that Mediterranean type of food. But once they try it, and then others are like highlighting it because they like it, and and like and trust them. So you kind of see this combination that's happening, but there's a social proof. and you start to see people post like, oh, look at my burrito from Chipotle. And they're like, oh, you know what? I need to go get a burrito from Chipotle, even though they probably just had one the night before. Right? And you see it, social proof. It happens all the time.
Well, it's FOMO, right? It's the fear of missing out as well. And that's what, again, Facebook. But here is one that made me think on social proof as well. Nobody likes canned laughter, but it works.
It works.
So when you hear the canned laughter on shows, on TV shows, it makes us laugh longer and harder. It does. The difference is especially great with poor quality jokes. But for some reason, there's that social proof that other people liked it. So we tend to laugh along as well. It's like telling us when to laugh, right? But we do.
Yeah, I wonder, like, for example, on our podcast, Rick, if we just drop a couple laugh tracks in here every now and then, we could.
Yeah, whenever I make a joke that's not obvious, I'll just hit a button and we'll get some canned laughter going in. Sure.
There we go. No, this is good. Social proof, guys, and we're all guilty of it. Social proof on Amazon reviews, social proof on Facebook likes, social proof on tweets and things like that. We're looking for it. I get my news, Rick, whether it's right or wrong. I go to Twitter sometimes just to get the quick glimpse of the news of the day.
That's right.
What am I looking for? Social proof of what's happening. It's how I've learned, for example, recently, John Gruden is suing the NFL.
Yep.
I learned that from the NFL. So,
Yep.
And it's probably not a safe place to be for long.
No.
But we that's how we track stuff. We want to know what the rest of the world is thinking and wanting and feeling.
That's right.
All right, so let's get to the next one. This is really, really good. Authority. Let's talk about authority.
This one was one of my favorite kind of realizations. So authority is the easiest one, right? Because you're the boss. We talk about this in leadership all the time, right? The first level of leadership is authorities, that you got the title, right? It's now what you do with it. But this story always stuck with me on this one, though. But authority has a real place. And if you've ever heard this statement on television, watching an advertisement, I'm not a doctor, I play one on TV. The reason that statement exists goes all the way back to like 1976, somewhere around there. Robert Young played a doctor on TV. He gets hired by Senka to espouse the benefits of drinking decaffeinated coffee and the health benefits. And people believed him because he played a very convincing doctor on one of the 3 networks at the time. And they felt that was like, they believed that they were getting advice from a doctor because he played one on TV. It led to the change where that you have to say that now, that I'm not a real doctor, I just play one on TV. And even with that statement, people will still lend more authority because you've got the white lab coat on and you're saying that you're a doctor, that they will still believe you more than if you don't make that statement.
It is powerful. Absolutely. I was thinking as you were sharing that, there's so many different examples of that. If you turn on the news or just the TV and watch any commercial, you're going to see, they're putting Rob Gronkowski on USAA commercials.
I saw that, and it's horrible. It's a horrible commercial.
What's the connection there? He didn't serve in the military. His mom and dad didn't serve in the military, but yet he's an authority, in some people's minds, maybe feeding that generation. So maybe in some cases we've gone overboard. We're just trying to grab the celebrity and putting him in front of the camera to highlight something. I saw commercial of Tom Brady and Matt Damon, both independently, talking about, I don't know if it was Bitcoin or, cryptocurrency, right? Authority. Are they authority? They're well-regarded actors, well-regarded athletes and celebrities, for sure, 100%. And I don't want to knock them for who they are. But when you put a real authority in front who can really speak it in a way that maybe matches up with some of the things we talked about last week, attunement, buoyancy, clarity, then I think you put yourself in a position of moving people. So, but people do defer to experts and to those in positions of authority. There's no question about it.
And if you ever get frustrated at a commercial where again, like the Cyndi Lauper is pushing medicine now, but if you get frustrated at that, it's you've got to check yourself too, because that stuff works. It's interesting to how blindly people will follow instructions. There's actually something I found kind of funny, and it's scary at the same time. But that doctor being an authority, there was a case where they were putting in abbreviated forms, and so they were trying to have somebody treat an ear infection, and the doctor abbreviated and said place in R ear, and the nurses, a large percentage of them, were preparing to put a dose in somebody's anus because they read rear versus our ear, and they knew it was an ear infection. But the point is that it came from an authority. There was also an experiment that they did to show how nurses followed a doctor's directive via phone, and the directive was a very lethal dose of medicine, and the overwhelming percentage of nurses that prepared the dose, now obviously they didn't administer it, they were just wanting to know, like, would they do it? And they're like, well, the doctor said, so therefore, this is what I'm going to do. I thought that was really, really powerful.
Yeah, that's powerful. So here's what flashed in my mind, Rick. I'm laughing because in 1988, I bought my first IBM PC compatible computer. Okay.
Yeah.
And at that time, they were putting all sorts of different celebrities in front. They had Alan Alda selling stuff, and I can't remember all the different ones. Well, the one that I got, there was King Kong Bundy. He was advertised. He was the authority person for Vendex computers. And I bought my Vendex computer. And somewhere, I got to find it. It's funny, man. King Kong Bundy, wrestler, pro wrestler, selling a computer as an authority. It worked, I guess. I bought one. All right. So next one, let's get into this, man. This is fun. So we talked about authority. How about scarcity? Let's talk about scarcity. The rule of the few, man. What's the impact of that?
Well, I mean, they did some nice studies on this one. One was around a jar of cookies, right? So they gave 200 undergrads a jar with 2 cookies and a jar with 10 cookies. And they're the same cookies. But the jar with 2 cookies were rated higher and was said that they were more pleasurable to eat. And it was just in the fact that they were more scarce. This one I attuned to quite a bit because again, in advertising, it's misused a lot. I've written a series called The Art of Ethical Influence. So all of these things that we're talking about are things that influence. And if you can use them and they're available to ethically use them, you should. But a lot of times we take these same principles, infomercials, you see it all the time, call in the next 15 minutes to get this special bonus offer. Yeah. Look, if you call 6 hours from now, they're going to give you that bonus offer. That's right. That's artificial scarcity. Russell Brunson of ClickFunnels really tapped into this. And he has an automated thing. You can build a ClickFunnels that says this demand, like whenever you log on to the website to go buy this product, it says, hey, a webinar is kicking off in the next 10 minutes. Join now. Well, that's the same 10 minutes for everybody. It's actually a recorded webinar behind it, but they're like, hey, I'm going live in the next 10 minutes. That's artificial scarcity, and it's used quite a bit, but there's a powerful, compelling factor. NFTs are this new thing, if you haven't heard about it, these non-fungible tokens, they're going nuts, but right now it's based on the scarcity principle. It's basically saying if you purchase this, you're the only person in the world that says you can own it. That's what they're selling. Like somebody bought the Charlie Bit My Finger video for $1 million. Yeah. Now, everybody's seen it to death, but one person in the world can say, I own that video. That's my video, right? That's what scarcity can do. Like scarcity really can drive. That's why somebody just spent a ridiculous amount for one baseball card, right? It's scarcity in the sense that it's so rare that I own it.
Well, and guys, we're dealing with scarcity right now in the marketplace. I mean, This is a real problem, right? So we know that supply and, the supply chain's kind of goofed up and there's limited supplies of things. At least we perceive that there is, right? We perceive. So even if the reality isn't there, if we can make a perception that something is rare, that there's few of these things, then, then you can see, one, people are going to be like, they're going to grab it like, well, there's not very many of these things, I'm going to go get this. Right. So you see this like PlayStation 5s and Xboxes that are dealing with this cars, used cars. It's hard to find you hear the phrase, it's hard to find a good used car. You can probably find one, no problem. It may be jacked up in price because there's a fear of missing out. There's a scarcity mindset that takes place. And so we're seeing this all the time. We are victims of the scarcity. And here, let's be real. I have fallen trap, probably more so than I care to count, on FOMO, fear of missing out. Rick, I mean, I'm sure it's happened to you too, right?
Oh, all the time. Yeah.
Right. And we think, well, gosh, I better go grab that. I better get that now. Christmas is coming, guys. Right. So when you're watching this, we're right there, right on the edge of Christmas. And I'm laughing. Turbo Man, right? You've ever seen the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie?
So not only that, but Dr. Cialdini actually talks on a personal level about toys, Christmas toys. Yeah. There's always that 2 or 3 toys that get identified out of nowhere. Like, we don't know who identified them, but somebody identified them that are the must-haves, and you can't get them. So it's driving prices up on eBay. He says, but go into the store. He said, write them down. Do it this year. Write down what the news, the media are covering as this is the toy you simply can't get, right? Yeah. And then go into the store in January or February, and you will see an abundance of it. 2 things happen. Number one, there's scarcity, which drives the pricing up, and it gets everybody into that I want it, that they will also buy it in January and February because it was the must have. Now, they didn't even know the thing existed before. Like PlayStation 5, I think at this point had some true scarcity. Yeah. I don't think the scarcity is as big as it should be right now. It's just they've tapped into it now. Everybody wants it, and it's not even, I mean, it's cool, but there's not even that many new features to drive this demand. But Apple was a big one of it, like the new iPhone, right? And of course, they're starting to wear that out a little bit. But if you notice, there's always, especially when the media gets involved and they start covering the stories. I'm already hearing, because of the supply chain, the retailers are already tapping into that. So Best Buy is doing they did 2 different Black Friday rollouts, and they already rolled one out in November because they're like, look, the supply chain is so messed up. You're not going to be able to get that TV you want for Christmas unless you buy it now.
That's right.
We can't guarantee it's going to be here for you. It's brilliant, but it's tapping into that scarcity.
It is the number one technique that's being used today, guys, to sell to you is scarcity. And we're not saying that there aren't moments where there are some scarcity where it may not be as available as you think you'd hoped it to be. But the truth of it is, it's a marketing element. It's marketing, pure and simple, and we can make fun of it too. We can talk about times past, toilet paper. Remember that?
I actually just watched this thing. It's called 15 Minutes of Shame, but the guy that got it's on HBO Max, really good. But it's talking about these news stories where these people were shamed. And this is the guy that started to see that there was going to be some scarcity in antibacterial, right? Yep. The alcohol. So he went and stockpiled it so that he could sell it on Amazon. And basically that his job was to identify things that people can't get, go find it, and then sell it to people on Amazon. And he ends up getting lambasted for it because he had this huge supply, which was just part of it. But the point being is, even that guy, he saw an opportunity. There was going to be scarcity. It was a way to turn a buck, and he did it.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So scarcity, it's a good one. Now let's go to the next one, Rick. I mean, there's so many good ones in here. Let's get into commitment and consistency. All right. Yeah. People want to be consistent. If they make a voluntary public commitment, they follow through. Talk about the power of this. This is pretty interesting, isn't it?
People were not only there's several different studies here. I'll recap real quick. One of my favorites was talking about getting somebody to try a new soda drink. And so if you say they baselined and said, would you like to try this soda drink? And they baseline the responses. And then they just changed one thing. And they said, are you an adventurous person? And only if you said yes, did they ask you to try the drink? And of course, the percentage went way up, because once you've made a statement, you fight to stay consistent with that statement. You've done it before. You've jumped to a conclusion and said no to something to your kids, and then they start questioning it, and you're wrong, but you got to stay consistent now. And so you just kind of push through that. I thought that was really interesting. Another one of the studies was they wanted to see, this is during the Keeping California Beautiful thing. So they not that, but Drive Carefully. So this firm went out to do the study, and they said they wanted homeowners to install a big Drive Carefully billboard on their front lawns. And 83% of the people said no, we're not going to allow that. But a different group, they asked them to put an 8-centimeter sign first. And then they asked for the big billboard, and 76% of the people agreed. So what happened is they already had said yes once. And so that commitment and consistency lent them to say yes to the bigger thing before. So the same thing happened is with the Keep California Beautiful stuff. 50% of the time after they signed a simple petition, then they asked them to put the billboard or the sign in their yard. And 50% of the people said yes after they signed the petition, because again, they wanted to appear consistent.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really interesting story. The thing about this, right? The idea of commitment and consistency, it probably is the number one thing that allows me to go back and buy something. I'll give you an example. I know you're not an Apple guy, but you'll still recognize and understand this. 15 years ago, I wasn't an Apple guy at all. And then I went and got one and I tried it. I'm like, wow, that's pretty good. And then I got other Apple things, and pretty much I outfitted my whole family. So anytime Apple puts something out, it's not that I go buy it, but they have shown consistency in what they're doing. There's a commitment and consistency that Apple brings to the table. And again, this is not an Apple commercial. We could talk about other brands. I could talk about USAA, which we brought up earlier. There's a consistency that they have, right? So when we find that brand, for example, that shows that continually reflects commitment and consistency, we're more propelled to say, you know what? They've proven themselves before, and I'm going to continue to do that again. But really, this allows us to think about our own self, right? We're all, I love Mike Kim's book, You Are the Brand. And it's a powerful book. And that's a different book that not even on our Books to Lead groups session, but recommend that. We'll have them on a call. But the idea is simple this, right? We are our brand. What are we doing to show commitment and consistency? Because that's going to be critical. People are going to come back. It's not always about the first time buy or the first time sell. It's the ability for them to want to come back and continue to do business with you. How do we do that? Well, we've got to have values. We got to have those values, those beliefs, those attitudes that we continue to show and reflect, because that's who we are. And people will buy into that. I think that's the way I see it, Rick.
They'll also leave you if you're inconsistent, right?
If you're inconsistent, like, wow, people talk about McDonald's all the time. McDonald's isn't all that great, but they're consistent, right? You're getting a McDonald's fry. It's pretty much the same no matter where you go. But if you had different restaurants that just, not the same every single time, it's inconsistent, you're going to give up. To Rick's point, you're going to give up. Be consistent.
So what's interesting thing about commitment and consistency is anybody who's ever bought a car has gotten into this. So if you think about it, right, by the time, first of all, they keep you there forever. And that's on purpose. You've already driven the car. And now you're going to this other person. And that's when the financing comes in. And the price is inevitably going to be higher. And then there's all these options and things like that. But what they're banking on, the fact is, by the time you've already arranged financing, you filled out all the forms, you've driven the car, you've imagined yourself taking this car home, that decision then stands on so many legs that it's not likely to kill the sale if the price goes up. And they know that you've already said yes to the car. You've already said yes so many times that this is where they start using this lowball technique to really kind of drive that price up and get those last things. And you stay consistent with those yeses.
Yeah. That's a great one. Good example. All right. So we've gone through 6. Rick, there's a 7th one. We'll just touch on it super quick because I know we need to land the plane on this. But he added in this updated version of the book is this idea of unity. The we is the shared me. And I thought that was interesting. He even shares a story of him going to buy a television. And he's the guy that understands this, and there was a scarcity bit of it, but there was this united element of service, really, that I saw in this. Like, you know what, there is, kind of a, the American viewpoint, and us getting behind a common cause together. So that's really what he's talking about. Any comments on that?
Yeah, this is with the advent of social media and how things change and influence. I think this was an apropos ad because people will unify under beliefs more because they're getting also the social proof of it, right?
Yeah.
So, but social proof alone, just wanting to belong to a cause or just belong to a thing is where that unity comes in. And I think that's powerful.
Yeah, so good. All right, man. This has been great. We want to invite you guys to go to our website, breakingaverage.com, and we'll try to share and show as much, add more information for you. But this has been another powerful time with you, Rick. I've really enjoyed this. Let's go land with the tip and challenge. What's your tip and challenge?
Yeah, my tip and challenge in this is to be aware of these different things. So for instance, the next time that you feel either really wanting something or compelled to go buy something, my challenge is to stop and identify why and challenge that. So is it scarce? Is it because you're consistent with the brand? Is it because you just like the brand? But start to identify, because that self-reflection is where this stuff is really going to tie in for you. And that allows you to learn how to apply these principles. Find out what works on you and why it's working on you. Right. So why do you feel compelled to pick up the phone at 2 a.m. because you just saw an infomercial? What was it about it? And you're not going to use that device. You didn't want it. You didn't even know it existed until you started watching that infomercial. So what was it that drove you to make that purchase? And I think you'll start to understand some of these levels of influence.
Yeah, I love it. That's good. Yeah, I would say my tip and challenge is put yourself in the position of the mover. All right. So here you've got 7 different principles and levers that you can use for sure. But I want to focus in on the authority one. I want you and me and all of us to recognize where we're passionate about the skills that we have, the awareness that we have, the experience that you have. You are a subject matter expert in something. And because you're a subject matter expert in something, you are an authority. And you can use that authority charisma. We talked about that in one of our previous books. You can use that in a powerful way to be able to serve somebody else. And that was a word we used last week in our podcast. But use that authority to be able to add value to somebody else and be able to share something and upserve them in a way that's impactful. So that's my tip and challenge. Rick, any final thoughts as we close this out?
This has been a phenomenal episode, and I really, again, it's very academic, but it's a great read, especially when you start to get into the studies, because that'll tie in a lot for you.
Yep. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening to the Breaking Average podcast. We want to add value to you. Be sure to tell other folks about our podcast. Let them know the impact, the help of the assistance that maybe this show has been able to give you. And we're just so thankful for each of you. Join us again next week on the Breaking Average podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R² Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.